67 years old, and I still check the locks twice before bed. My son Marcus used to tease me about it. He'd say, "Dad, you live in a town where the biggest crime last year was somebody's chickens getting loose on Route 9. He wasn't wrong about that. Mill Haven, Tennessee. Population just under 4,000. The kind of place where the post office lady knows what you ordered online before the package arrives. Quiet town. Decent people. The kind of place where you think nothing can blindside you. You think that right up until your phone rings at 11:48 on a Wednesday night. Welcome back to Dad's Honest Revenge. Grab something warm, settle in, and remember, the people in these stories made their choices. They just never counted on the consequences catching up. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and let's get into it. I'm Raymond Colt. I worked 31 years as a floor manager at a furniture manufacturing plant outside of Knoxville before my knees made that decision for me. I'm the kind of man who keeps his receipts, reads the fine print, and has never once in his adult life bounced a check. My late wife Pauline would say I was the most boring, exciting man she ever met. Boring because I was steady. Exciting because, once in a while, steady is exactly what a situation needs. Pauline passed 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. The fast kind. We had 6 weeks from diagnosis to funeral, and I spent every one of those weeks sitting beside her in a hospital room on Magnolia Drive, holding her hand, listening to her talk about the grandchildren, and the garden, and the trip to Asheville we never quite got around to taking. She was 63 years old, and she was the best person I have ever known. I say that not because she was my wife. I say it because it's true in the plain, factual way that 2 + 2 is 4. I have 2 children. My son Marcus is 39. He works for the IRS Criminal Investigation Division out of Nashville. Has for the last 6 years. Before that, he was an accountant at a private firm, and before that he did 2 years in federal prison for tax fraud he did not commit. I'll get to that. My daughter Renee is 36. She's a kindergarten teacher. Sweet, patient, the kind of woman who still sends birthday cards with stickers inside. She married a man named Derek Ashby 8 years ago. Derek works in commercial real estate development. He is polished in the way that certain things are polished. Smooth on the surface, and you don't find out what's underneath until you press down. He had been staying in my spare room for 5 days when Marcus called. Derek's reason for being there was simple enough. He and Renee were having their kitchen and 1 bathroom completely renovated, he told me, and the dust and the noise were making it impossible to work from home. Just a week or so, Raymond, if you don't mind. I didn't mind. I'd made the man chili. I'd let him use Pauline's good coffee maker, the one I barely touch because she picked it out and it still smells like her somehow when it runs in the morning. I was 3/4 asleep when the phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. Marcus. My son did not call after 9 o'clock unless something was wrong. The last time he called me this late, it was to tell me his mother's test results had come back and they were not good. That was 4 years and 2 months ago, and I still feel it in my chest when I think about it. I answered before the second ring. Marcus's voice came through flat and low, not upset, controlled. The way a man sounds when he's had a long time to prepare for a conversation and is now finally in it. Dad, I need you to do something, and I need you to do it, without asking me why yet. Can you do that? I sat up. What's going on, Dad? Just my name. But the weight in it was enough. I'm listening, I said. Go to your home office. Close the door. Don't turn any extra lights on, just the desk lamp. Take your phone off the charger and keep it with you. And Dad. He paused for 2 full seconds. Don't say anything to Derek. Don't let on that anything is different. Can you do that? The room felt about 10 degrees colder than it had a moment ago. Derek Ashby, my son-in-law. The man sleeping 12 feet down the hall from where I was sitting. Marcus, I said quietly, you're worrying me. Good, he said. Stay worried. Stay quiet. Go now. I moved through my own house like I was a stranger in it. Past the framed photo of Renee and Marcus at the lake. The summer they were 8 and 11, and the world was still simple. Past Pauline's cross-stitch hanging by the hallway thermostat. She'd made it the winter she was pregnant with Renee, a single blue thread spelling out, the best things in life aren't things. I used to roll my eyes at it. Now I straighten it every time I walk past. I eased my office doors shut, sat in the dark with just the desk lamp burning orange on the corner, and I waited. I didn't have to wait long. My phone buzzed again. A text from Marcus. Don't go into the garage. Don't turn on the garage light, but in about 10 minutes. See if you can hear anything from the interior door. The garage. I have a 2-car garage attached to the back of the house, accessible from a door off the kitchen hallway. I used to keep a workbench in there. Pauline's gardening supplies. Normal things. After she passed, I mostly just parked in it and ignored the rest of it. I told myself I was being calm. That's not entirely true. My hands were doing something they hadn't done in years. This particular kind of stillness that isn't peace, but is just all the movement going inward. I waited 8 minutes. Then I walked in my socks to the interior garage door and stood beside it without touching the handle. At first, nothing. Then, the sound of something shifting. Not loud. Deliberate. The sound of something being moved carefully by a person who did not want to be heard. I stood there for what felt like a long time. The sounds continued at intervals. Slow, methodical. The same sound, slightly different position, like a man working his way across a space he knew well. I went back to my office and typed to Marcus. Someone's in the garage. 3 dots appeared immediately. I know. Go back to bed. Lock your bedroom door. I'll be there in 90 minutes. I want to tell you I slept. I did not sleep. I lay on top of the covers of my clothes with the bedside lamp on, and a level of alertness I hadn't felt since the year Marcus was in Butner and I spent every night running the same math over and over, trying to find the place where something had gone wrong. Marcus arrived at 1522 a.m. He texted me from the driveway. Side door. Leave the porch light off. He looked like a man who had been running on 4 hours of sleep for the better part of a week. 39 years old, and the lines around his eyes had gotten deep in a way they hadn't been 2 years ago. He had Pauline's build, lean and straight, and her eyes, the kind that don't spend time on things that don't matter. He was in dark clothes, no badge showing, just my son standing in my kitchen at 2 in the morning, looking at me the way you look at someone you've been trying to protect and are now very close to the end of being able to. He set a folder on Pauline's kitchen table and sat down. I sat across from him. I said, talk. He talked for 37 minutes. I didn't interrupt once. If you know me, you know that is the single most unnatural thing I am capable of. It started, the way the worst things always start, with money. Pauline's estate. She'd had a life insurance policy, a retirement account from the 22 years she worked as an office administrator at a dental group on Sycamore Street, and the house. Nothing extravagant. Combined, somewhere around $380,000. Enough to matter. The will was straightforward. She'd written it in 2011 with an attorney downtown. Equal split between Marcus and Renee, with the house going to me with right of survivorship, and a small amount set aside for her sister Carol in Baton Rouge, who Pauline had been sending grocery money to for years, without ever once making Carol feel like it was charity. That was Pauline. She did the right thing the way most people breathe, automatically, without needing credit for it. The estate settled 2 years after she passed. The distribution matched the will exactly, or so I believed. Marcus opened the folder. It didn't, he said. Renee's share had come through correctly. Mine had come through correctly. Marcus's share had been reduced to $9,000, a token amount, with the remainder folded into Renee's portion, which meant Derek's portion. I looked at my son. He looked back at me with the patience of a man who had spent a long time learning to sit with things that should have made him stand up and put his fist through a wall. The attorney who handled the estate filing, Marcus said. Derek had a prior relationship with him. College connection. The original will was substituted in the filing. A modified version, one that marginalized my share, was submitted to probate instead. I said the one word I had. How? The original got pulled before submission and replaced. We think Derek kept a physical copy of the real one as leverage. Leverage against who? Marcus looked at me carefully. Against Renee, in case she ever became a problem. I sat with that. Derek Ashby had held onto evidence of his own crime as a leash on my daughter. I put that thought in a place in my mind I would deal with later. A place labeled, do not open this until you are somewhere you can afford to break something. And the tax case, I said. Your case. Marcus exhaled through his nose, long and slow. Derek had a contact at a regional accounting firm in Chattanooga. They built a paper trail. Fictitious client transactions, altered billing records, documents with my name and credentials attached to work I never performed. Filed an anonymous tip with the Treasury Inspector General. It was on my desk at the firm inside 3 weeks and in front of a grand jury in 4 months. He stopped. Then, I want you to understand how constructed it was, Dad. How planned. This wasn't a reaction to something. He mapped this out before he married Renee. He needed me out of the picture before the estate settled because I was the one who would have looked at the numbers and known. That sentence landed in my chest like a stone going into still water. The rings are still spreading. Before he married Renee, Derek Ashby had already decided my son needed to be in federal prison. He had sat at my Thanksgiving table, carved my turkey, played with my grandchildren, handed me a Father's Day card with his name signed under my daughter's, and the plan had already been in motion. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. After Budner, after you got out, after you joined the division. All these years, why am I finding out in my own kitchen at 2 a.m? Marcus looked at me for the first time since he'd started talking. Because you would have gone to Renee. I opened my mouth, and Renee would have told Derek, not to protect him. She doesn't know any of this, Dad. She would have told him because she tells him things. That's what she does. That's who she is. He paused, and Derek would have run, or worse, he has connections to at least 3 other people in this. Individuals who had exposure. If he felt the pressure too early, people could have been hurt. Evidence could have disappeared, and I would have had 8 years of work and nothing to show for it. I said, the garage. He nodded. We've had reason to believe he's been using your garage for physical document storage. He's accessed your property during previous visits. We have that from a neighbor's security camera footage from 14 months ago. We couldn't get a warrant without exposing the full scope of the investigation prematurely. He almost smiled. It looked like it cost him. So we waited for him to come to us. Used my garage as bait. I used his paranoia as bait. He can't keep incriminating documents anywhere connected to his own name. He needed a storage point he controlled that couldn't be traced back to him. Marcus looked at the table. Your house has been that for at least 2 years. I thought about that. 2 years of Derek Ashby sitting in my living room, eating at my table, asking me how my knees were holding up, and using the back quarter of my home as his personal evidence locker. While I made the man chilly. What's in there? I asked. We'll know by morning, Marcus said. There's a team outside. They've been documenting everything he accessed tonight. We needed him to retrieve the documents himself. Needed it on record that he personally handled them. He reached into the folder and slid something across the table to me. It was a printed email, Renee's address in the sender line. The subject, table for 9, Ashby anniversary dinner. Saturday the 19th. This Saturday, I said. 8 o'clock. Brennan's on 5th, downtown Knoxville. He looked at me steadily. We're going to let him order his dinner. He let that land. We're going to let him order his dinner. He let that land, and then we finish it. I looked at my son in the kitchen light for a long moment. He looked like his mother. Same jaw, same quality of attention. Pauline used to say that patience wasn't about waiting, it was about staying ready while you waited. Marcus had learned that from her. He'd had 8 years to practice it. I looked at the photo of Pauline on the refrigerator, the one from the summer before she got sick, squinting into the sun at Renee's backyard barbecue, laughing at something somebody said off camera. She's going to be at that dinner, I said. Renee. Yes. She doesn't know any of it, no. I nodded slowly. That's the part that's going to be hard. Marcus said. I know, Dad. I told him to go get some sleep. He told me the same. Neither of us quite meant it. I went back to my room. I lay there listening to the house settle, thinking about the guest room down the hall where Derek Ashby was sleeping the sleep of a man who believed he had already won, which he had for 8 years. Credit where it's due. He had won, and winning had made him comfortable, and comfortable had made him careless, and careless had brought him back to my garage on a Wednesday night in November. Saturday morning, I woke at 6:15 and made a full breakfast. Eggs, toast, sliced tomato, coffee. I was standing at the stove when Derek came downstairs at 7:40 in his robe, looking rested, scrolling his phone. He said, Any coffee left? I said. Made a fresh pot. He poured himself a cup, sat in my kitchen at Pauline's table. He scrolled and sipped. He had the particular ease of a man with no apparent reason in the world to feel anything but comfortable. And why not? He had sent my son to prison and walked away clean. He had rewritten my wife's will and collected the difference. He had been sitting in my home for 5 days and he had been sleeping without any trouble at all. He looked up from his phone. Big night tonight. Renee's been so excited about this dinner. She put a lot of work into it, I said. 8 years. He shook his head in a way that was meant to look fond. Hard to believe. It really is, I said. He looked at me for a half-second. Something flickered. Quick and small, the way a light flickers when a circuit is stressed, there and gone before you could name it. Then the expression reset, smooth and pleasant, and he went back to his phone. I turned back to the stove. Enjoy the coffee, I thought. Last cup you'll drink as a free man. Brennan's on 5th sat at the corner of Gay Street and 5th Avenue in downtown Knoxville. Dark wood paneling, white tablecloths, candle on every table, the kind of menu that describes everything in 3 words and charges you accordingly. The kind of place Derek Ashby loved because the room itself was a performance, and Derek performed well in rooms. I arrived at 7:40. Marcus had told me to be early. The reserved table was in a semi-private alcove near the back. Long table, 8 seats, flowers in the center. Renee had chosen white roses, Pauline's favorite. She didn't know she'd done something that would matter later, but she had. I ordered water and watched the room fill. Marcus's colleague arrived first. A woman named Sandra who worked in financial crimes enforcement. I'd met her once at Marcus's office holiday party, and she had the quality of someone who noticed everything and mentioned very little. She sat 2 tables away from the reserve section. She didn't look at me. I didn't look at her. Renee and Derek arrived at 8:02. Renee in a cream-colored dress, laughing at something Derek said as they came through the door. She looked like her mother from across the room. Same way of moving. Head slightly tilted. Smile that reached all the way up. My chest did the thing it does. She saw me, crossed the room, hugged me longer than usual. Daddy, you came. I wasn't sure you would. I wouldn't miss it, I said. And I meant it in every way she didn't know yet. Derek shook my hand. Firm, confident, he met my eyes directly and held them for a beat longer than necessary. The kind of look that's performing confidence rather than having it. Raymond, he said. Glad you could make it. Glad to be here, I said. The rest of the table filled in. 2 couples from Derek's professional circle, the men in the kind of sport coats that cost as much as a house payment, their wives with that particular downtown Knoxville polish that takes effort to look effortless. Renee's colleague from school, a young woman named Beth, who brought a card with a hand-drawn cake on the front, and Pauline's sister Carol, who had driven up from Baton Rouge because Renee had insisted, and who sat at the far end of the table with the quiet, watchful presence of a woman who had loved my wife for 60 years and was not going to miss an important evening in this family. Carol knew. Marcus had told her 3 weeks ago. She had sat with it and said almost nothing, which is how Carol handles things that are too large for words. She caught my eye when she sat down. She didn't smile. She put one hand flat on the table, a small, deliberate gesture, and I understood it. I'm here. We do this together. Derek worked the table the way he always worked rooms. Handshakes, easy laughter, remembering names, topping off wine glasses before the server reached them. He told a story about a development deal in Chattanooga that had everyone leaning in. He was magnetic in the specific way that certain things are magnetic. You lean toward the heat without thinking about it, right up until it marks you. We were on the first course when he looked down the table at me and raised his glass. I raised mine back. I thought, Dominic said you'd enjoy your appetizer. Then I corrected myself because this was my story, not someone else's. I thought Marcus said, enjoy the dinner, and I watched Derek take a long, satisfied sip of his wine. My phone buzzed once under the table. Marcus. 5 minutes. I set it face down. Beside me, Carol had gone very still. The entrees arrived. Derek was mid-sentence, something about a zoning variance, a word he used with the ease of a man who had spent years making complicated things sound routine. The candlelight was warm on the white tablecloths. Renee was laughing. Beth from the school was telling a story about one of Renee's students who had apparently given her a macaroni portrait as a birthday gift and called it a masterpiece. The front door of Brennan's on 5th opened. Marcus Pierce walked in. He was in a dark suit, white shirt, no tie. Behind him were two people I had not met. Sandra from the other table stood and joined them as they moved through the restaurant. The three of them moved through the dining room with a particular quality of authority that doesn't announce itself and doesn't need to. The room didn't stop all at once. It slowed the way a river slows before a bend. A table near the host stand went quiet. A server stepped aside. The couple from Derek's firm who were facing the door looked up, and their expressions went through several things in quick succession. Renee saw Marcus before Derek did. Her face opened up the way it always did when she saw her brother. "Marcus. Oh, you're here. I didn't know you were." Her voice slowed. Stopped. She was looking at the two people behind him. Derek turned around. He turned slowly, like a man who had heard a sound and already knew before he completed the motion what he was going to see. He saw my son, and I watched something happen that I had been waiting 8 years to watch, though I hadn't known I was waiting for it. That particular quality of composure that Derek Ashby had assembled over years of practice. Smooth, deliberate, assembled like a piece of furniture built to look like it had always existed. I watched it leave his face. Not all at once. Layer by layer. Like weather moving off a hillside. Underneath it was just a man. Just the actual man for one unguarded, irretrievable moment. Marcus walked the length of that dining room without looking at anyone but Derek. He stopped at the head of the table. He looked down at the man who had put him in federal prison, who had rewritten his mother's will, who had sat in this family's life for 8 years, wearing a face that was never quite his own. Derek Allen Ashby. Marcus's voice was quiet, entirely steady. "You are under arrest for obstruction of justice, fraud in connection with a legal instrument, and conspiracy to commit tax fraud resulting in wrongful prosecution." The table went to stone. "You have the right to remain silent. Marcus." Derek's voice came out thinner than he intended. He was reaching for the composure, assembling it back into place piece by piece, the way a man picks up something he's dropped. "This is a private dinner. This is my anniversary. Whatever you think. I have the original probate submission from the Colt estate. I have the substituted document you arranged with Robert Gaines at Fairfield and Associates. I have 3 years of financial records connecting you to the Chattanooga firm that constructed the documentation used to prosecute me." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "I also have Robert Gaines, who agreed to a full cooperation agreement last Tuesday morning. He says hello." Derek opened his mouth, closed it. Sandra stepped around Marcus with handcuffs, and Derek Ashby stood up from the anniversary dinner my daughter had spent months planning. From the table with the white roses and the candles and the entrees still steaming, and he stood up and he looked down the length of that table directly at me. I looked back at him. I did not say a word. I held his eyes and I let him look at whatever he needed to look at. Let him read whatever was there to read in the face of a man who made him chilly and offered him Pauline's coffee maker and said good morning in the kitchen while quietly waiting for his son to finish building a case that took 8 years. "You sat at my table," I thought. "You slept under my roof. You stood in my church and sang hymns next to my daughter. You held my grandchildren. You shook my hand at my wife's funeral and looked me in the eye while the whole architecture of this was already in place. I was not the fool in the room. I was just the last one to know it." The handcuffs clicked. One of the women from Derek's firm made a sound like she'd been lightly struck. Beth set down her fork very carefully. "Pastor? No, there was no pastor at this dinner. That was someone else's story." Carol, at the far end of the table, sat with both hands in her lap and looked at her plate with the expression of a woman fulfilling a duty she had accepted and would not perform again. Renee had not moved. She was sitting in her cream-colored dress with her hands on the edge of the table and her face doing something I had no complete name for. Not shock exactly. More like the feeling of a floor that you have been standing on for 8 years quietly shifting under you, and your body knowing it before your mind does. Marcus's colleagues walked Derek toward the door. He didn't fight, whatever he was, and I spent a long time thinking about what exactly he was. He was not the kind of man who made a scene when the scene was over. The composure came back at the edges, just barely. just enough for the exit. Even now, the performance didn't fully stop. At the door, he did not look back. I noticed that. I noticed it, and I filed it, and I let it go. Marcus came back to the table. He sat down in the empty chair beside Renee, not across from her. Beside her, the way he used to sit next to her on the couch when they were children watching television. He looked at her the way you look at someone you love who is about to have something very hard explained to them, and you are the one who has to do it. "Renee," he said, "I'm sorry. I am so sorry I couldn't tell you before tonight." She looked at her brother. Her eyes were dry, which surprised me. Then again, she was Pauline's daughter. "The will," she said. "Yes, Mom's real will. What she actually wrote. What she actually wrote. What she actually wanted." He said it gently. "Your share stays. Mine gets restored. Carol's disbursement too. Everything the way Mom intended." Renee turned and looked at Carol. Something passed between them that I won't try to describe because it belongs to them. That look. The kind of understanding that moves between women who have loved the same person for their whole lives and are now sitting together on the other side of losing her. Then Renee looked at me. "Daddy," she said, and her voice broke on that one word and nowhere else. I got up and walked to her the way I had walked to her 100 times since she was small. When she was afraid of the dark, when her first dog died, when Pauline got sick, when the world became something larger and harder than it had seemed before. I put my arms around her, and she held on with both hands. "I've got you," I said. "I have always got you." She cried once, quietly, briefly, with the particular restraint of a woman who is going to need to be strong for a long time and knows it, and is deciding right now to begin. Then she pulled back, looked at the table, and said nothing for a moment. The server appeared at the edge of the alcove, uncertain. Renee looked up at him. "Could we get the entrees fresh? I think ours sat a little." Marcus looked at me. I looked at Carol. Carol looked at the ceiling with the expression of a woman containing a laugh she'd decided wasn't appropriate and being only partially successful. "Yes, ma'am," the server said. "Absolutely." The table exhaled. Beth picked her fork back up. The wine was refilled. Someone, I think it was one of the women from Derek's firm, to her considerable credit, said simply, "Well, happy anniversary, Renee," and it landed like exactly the right thing. We ate dinner, and it was, under the circumstances, a very good dinner. 4 weeks later, I came downstairs on a Tuesday morning and made coffee in Pauline's coffee maker and stood at the window looking at the backyard. December had settled in properly. The garden was bare. The oak tree along the back fence had lost the last of its leaves. On the kitchen table was a manila envelope from the probate court. Marcus had brought it over the evening before and set it there without ceremony. He'd said, "You should see it in the morning, in the light." Inside was a certified copy of Pauline's original will, her actual signature, her actual handwriting on the distribution instructions, slightly unsteady because she had written it during a difficult month and her hand had not been at its best. But there, completely there, her intentions, her words, what she had actually wanted for the people she loved, restored and filed correctly at last. I put my hand flat on the envelope. "Got him, Pauline," I said. To the kitchen. To the cross-stitch in the hall. To the woman who used to say that the best things in life weren't things and meant it down to her bones. We got him. The coffee was ready. I poured myself a cup and stood at the window and watched a bird land in the bare oak tree and sit there for a moment like it owned the branch, like it had been there all along and was simply waiting for the world to get quiet enough to notice. I drank my coffee. For the first time in a long time, it tasted right. If these stories mean something to you, please hit that like button and subscribe to Dad's Honest Revenge. Every one of them is built for you, and there are more coming.